September 29th, 1957. Deep in the Ural Mountains, inside a city that doesn't appear on any map, a storage tank holding what Soviet records later revealed as 80 tons of high-level radioactive waste loses its cooling system. The temperature spikes, the tank explodes. Force, estimated at 70 to 100 tons of TNT equivalent. And for the next 19 years, the world has no idea. Previously inside the fence, we mapped the Zato system, the Soviet Union's network of secret closed cities, built to hide nuclear weapons research, plutonium production, and military industry. Today, we're going inside the first and most notorious of them all. Ozersk, also known as Chelyabinsk 40, also known as City 40, founded in 1945, built from scratch in the frozen Urals. Home to the Mayak Production Association, the USSR's first industrial-scale plutonium facility. This is where the Soviet Union built the atomic bomb. And this is where it created a nuclear disaster whose contamination trace would stretch 300 kilometers across the Urals, yet remain invisible for 2 decades. August 1945. The United States drops atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Stalin orders physicist Igor Kurchatov to build a Soviet bomb. Fast. The site, a remote forest near Lake Irtyash, 70 kilometers northwest of Chelyabinsk. The mission, weapons-grade plutonium production. The deadline, impossible. Construction begins in 1946. The first reactor, known as Reactor A, or Anushka, goes critical in June 1948. Within a year, it's producing plutonium for the USSR's first atomic bomb. On August 29, 1949, the USSR detonates its first atomic device at Semipalatinsk. The plutonium core came from Mayak. The workers who made it happen live behind the fence in Chelyabinsk 40, a purpose-built city. Propiska required. No visitors. No exit without permission. But compared to the rest of the Soviet Union in 1949, it's a paradise. Heated apartments, stocked stores, theater, schools, priorities for everything. The trade, your freedom for your family's future. Plutonium production creates waste. Highly radioactive, liquid, hot, literally. In the early years, Mayak's solution is brutal and simple. From 1949 to 1956, according to declassified Soviet records and research by environmental historians, the facility dumps an estimated 76 million cubic meters of radioactive waste directly into the Techa River. The river flows north through dozens of villages, Metlino, Musliumovo, Brodokalmak, before joining the Ob River system and eventually reaching the Arctic Ocean. Downstream residents drink the water, fish in it, swim in it. By the early 1950s, radiation sickness begins appearing in the villages. Here's what we can verify. Declassified Soviet medical studies document severe health impacts among Techa riverside populations. Bone marrow damage, increased cancer rates, stillbirths. In 1951, the dumping into the Techa is reduced. Mayak begins storing high-level waste in steel and concrete tanks instead. By 1957, there are dozens of these tanks. They require constant cooling. But here's the catch. Tank 14 is about to fail. Tank 14 is a steel cylinder encased in concrete, buried underground. Soviet incident reports indicate it held approximately 80 tons of liquid radioactive waste, mostly nitrate and acetate salts from plutonium reprocessing. The cooling system had been malfunctioning for months, possibly over a year. The temperature inside climbs. The waste begins to dry out. Nitrate salts are chemically unstable when concentrated and heated. September 29, 1957. Between 4:20 and 4:22 p.m., Tank 14 explodes. The detonation is chemical, not nuclear, but the force is equivalent to 70 to 100 tons of TNT. The concrete lid, weighing 160 tons, is blown off. The According to declassified Soviet estimates and later international studies, approximately 20 million curies of radioactive material are released into the atmosphere. The wind is blowing northeast. Over the next several hours, estimates suggest 10 to 11. A radioactive plume drifts across the Urals, contaminating a narrow trace of land 300 kilometers long and up to 50 kilometers wide. This contaminated zone becomes known as the East Urals Radioactive Trace, the EURT. More than 20 villages lie in the path of the contamination. Population in the most contaminated zones. Approximately 10,000 to 12,000 people initially evacuated. The evacuations begin within days, not immediately. Dosimetry teams measure radiation levels first, then the orders come. Residents are told they have hours to pack. They're not told why. Livestock is left behind. Homes are bulldozed or buried. The displaced are resettled in surrounding areas. Some in Chelyabinsk, others in newly built villages outside the trace. But here's the critical detail. Ozersk itself is not evacuated. The city is just 10 kilometers from the explosion. The workers are essential. Mayak cannot stop. And then, the record goes quiet. For the next 19 years, the Kishtim disaster does not officially exist. Soviet authorities classify the incident at the highest level. The evacuated villages are erased from maps. The EURT is designated a restricted zone, but no public explanation is given. Soviet citizens in nearby regions hear rumors. Stories of a big accident, villages disappearing, mysterious illnesses. But nothing is confirmed. And here's what makes this worse. Even the CIA knows. Declassified CIA documents reveal that by 1959, U.S. intelligence has evidence of a serious nuclear accident in the Urals. But Washington stays silent. The reasons remain unclear. Some historians speculate the CIA didn't want to alarm the American public about the risks of the U.S. nuclear program. Others argue the intelligence was incomplete or ambiguous. It's not until 1976 that the disaster becomes public. Boris Medvedev, a Soviet dissident scientist living in exile in the UK, publishes a paper describing the disaster, based on fragmentary Soviet scientific literature and eyewitness accounts. Western scientists are skeptical at first, then the evidence mounts. By 1979, Medvedev publishes a full book, Nuclear Disaster in the Urals. The Soviet government doesn't officially acknowledge the Kishtim disaster until 1989. But Kishtim is not the only legacy of Mayak. Between 1951 and 1953, when dumping into the Techa River was reduced, Mayak began using Lake Irtyash, a small, shallow lake near the facility, as an open-air radioactive waste reservoir. By the 1990s, Lake Irtyash is considered one of the most radioactive places on Earth. According to studies published by Russian nuclear safety institutes and the International Atomic Energy Agency, radiation levels were so high that standing on the shore for 1 hour could deliver a lethal dose. In 1967, a drought exposes the lakebed. Wind carries radioactive dust across the surrounding area, contaminating an additional 1,800 square kilometers, affecting an estimated 40,000 people, according to Soviet health monitoring records. Starting in the 1980s, Soviet and later Russian authorities begin filling the lake with concrete and rocks to entomb the waste. As of today, the lake is mostly filled, but the contamination remains. Ozersk still exists. As of 2025, the population is estimated at 80,000 to 90,000. The fence is still there. Propiska is still required. Foreigners are not allowed. Mayak is still operating. Today, it reprocesses spent nuclear fuel and produces isotopes for medical and industrial use. It remains one of the most contaminated sites in Russia. The East Urals radioactive trace is still restricted. Strontium-90 and cesium-137 have half-lives of about 30 years. Plutonium isotopes remain hazardous for thousands. Environmental monitoring continues. Resettlement of the evacuated zones is still prohibited in the most contaminated areas. Health studies of Mayak workers and downstream populations document elevated cancer rates, particularly leukemia and other radiation-related illnesses. A joint Norwegian-Russian expert group, coordinated by Norway's Radiation Protection Authority, has published extensive reports since the 1990s on Mayak's environmental and health legacy. The International Atomic Energy Agency retroactively classified the Kyshtym disaster as an INES Level 6 event on the scale developed after Chernobyl. The third worst nuclear accident in history, after Chernobyl Level 7 and Fukushima Level 7. The total number of fatalities directly attributable to the Kyshtym explosion remains uncertain. Soviet records are incomplete. Estimates of direct and radiation-related deaths among exposed populations range from 200 to over 1,000 in the years following the disaster, with long-term cancer deaths disputed and likely higher. What is certain? The disaster and subsequent contamination events contaminated over 20,000 square kilometers, displaced thousands, and was covered up for 2 decades. And it happened in a city that officially didn't exist. If you want the next hidden chapter of the Cold War, subscribe. Next time, Artemis 16, the city that designed the Soviet hydrogen bomb, where Andrei Sakharov built the most powerful weapon ever detonated, then became the regime's most dangerous dissident. And tell me in the comments, would you have stayed in Ozersk after the explosion, or risked leaving without permission?